back! This is not what you think! Stop! I'm warning you!
It was 3:11 a.m. dead quiet. Even the crickets were sleeping. And then, boom! My front door ripped inward like someone drop-kicked a refrigerator through it. Splinters blasted across the floor. The alarm started screaming. And before I could even sit up, 4 dudes in black tactical vests stormed inside yelling, "HOA compliance sweep. Remain where you are." My brain short-circuited. Compliance sweep? At 3 a.m.? Who the hell does a compliance sweep at vampire hours? And remember, I'm not some helpless guy. I'm Eli Carson, ex-Army MP, medically retired after a spinal injury. These days I mostly run a small repair shop out of my garage and try to keep my 18-year-old son, Mason, on a straight path. He's a good kid, quiet, smart, builds PCs for his friends, hates drama. But we live in a neighborhood where drama isn't just frequent. It's weaponized. Before we get started, I've got a quick question for you. Tell us which beautiful country you tuned in from and what time it is. I'd love to know. Alright, so here's how this circus started. I swear on everything, the night it happened didn't feel real. It felt like a scene ripped straight out of one of those budget action movies my son and I roast on weekends. Except this time the explosions weren't badly edited CGI, they were happening in my damn hallway. Thanks to our HOA president, Linda Maddox, aka the dollar store dictator of Maple Ridge Estates. But nothing, not her insane fines, not her petty power trips, prepared me for this. The first guy shoved into my bedroom, pointing a flashlight at my face like it was a gun. Hands where we can see them. You've been cited for repeated non-compliance and obstruction of HOA authority. I squinted at him. The vest looked like it came off Wish. The badge wasn't even metal. It was shiny laminated plastic with HOA enforcement operations printed in all caps. I said, "Man, get the hell out of my room before I teach you what real enforcement looks like." Instead of answering, he ripped the blankets off me. Behind him, another guy ran into the hall yelling, "Found the kid!" My stomach dropped. "Mason." I shot out of bed, but one of them shoved me back down with a baton. "Remain still. This is a sanctioned HOA inspection." "Sanctioned by who?" I growled. He smirked. "President Maddox. She signed a seizure order." A seizure order? For what? Being behind on my HOA dues? Parking my work truck on the street? Breathing in a manner she didn't like? I tried to stand again, but he lowered the baton, ready to swing. He didn't realize something important. Mason wasn't the type to freeze. A few months earlier, after our house got broken into while we were sleeping, I taught him firearm safety. I made it crystal clear. Don't touch the gun unless I tell you or unless someone breaks in and I can't protect you. Honestly, I never thought he'd need to use that knowledge. I wanted him to feel safe, not armed. But life has a way of choosing chaos. While the thug in the hall was yelling at him, Mason slipped backward into his room. I could picture it without seeing him ducking under the desk, reaching for the biometric lockbox bolted to the wall, the one we practiced with for hours until he knew it by touch. Inside was his Ruger .22. Not a big gun, not an impressive one, but accurate and quiet and enough to make a point. I heard the click of the lockbox open, then a shaky breath, then pop. A sharp crack echoed through the hall. Silence, then screaming. The guy in the hallway collapsed, clutching his calf, blood soaking through his pant leg. "He shot me. The little psycho shot me." Mason stepped forward, both hands gripping the Ruger exactly how I taught him. Voice steady even though his arms shook. "Drop your weapons and get out of our house." He wasn't yelling. He wasn't panicked. He was calm. Too calm. And that scared me more than anything. The guy in my bedroom froze mid-swing. The two rummaging through my kitchen bolted for the back door like roaches in daylight. Within 5 seconds, the house went from chaos to dead quiet, except for the one injured guy groaning on my hardwood floor. Mason's eyes were locked on him. "Try getting up," he warned, "and I'll shoot again." I slid off the bed slowly, hands raised so Mason knew I was approaching. Hey, it's okay. Lower it, bud. I've got you." When the gun touched my palm, I felt how sweaty it was. His hands were trembling like he'd been holding a jackhammer. Pulled him into a hug. He didn't hug back. He was stiff, in shock. "You saved us," I whispered. I'm right here. You did good. You did what you had to. He finally let out a shuddering breath, like his body was catching up to his brain. Once he was safe in my arms, I called 911. 911, what's your emergency? Fake HOA officers broke into my house. My son defended himself. One's down, the others ran. There was a long pause. Then the dispatcher said, "Please repeat that?" "Yeah," I said. "You heard me." Real police arrived 6 minutes later. Lights, sirens, the whole works. When they saw the fake uniforms, the bogus badges, the printed HOA warrant of entry with misspelled words, one officer muttered, "Jesus, this is some diet Swat nonsense." But deep down, I already knew who sent them. And I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because Linda Maddox didn't just want compliance. She wanted control. And tonight, she declared war. The sun wasn't even up yet, but my entire street looked like a crime show set. Cruisers everywhere. Blue and red lights bouncing off garage doors. Half the neighborhood standing on their lawns wearing pajamas and confusion. One cop was photographing the fake HOA enforcement badges. Another was bagging evidence. The guy Mason shot, early 30s, shaved head, built like a gym membership scam, was being loaded into an ambulance, yelling profanity at every human within earshot. But Mason, he sat on the front porch, hoodie pulled tight, staring at nothing. I stayed glued to his side. The officer taking my statement kept shaking his head. "Mr. Carson, I need to confirm one more time. These men specifically said they were HOA enforcement?" I gestured toward the trash heap of tactical cosplay scattered across my living room. "They didn't whisper it. And they forced entry without announcing as police or presenting a real warrant?" "Correct." He blew out a breath. Jesus. I should have felt relief the cops were on our side. Mason was safe. The intruders were caught. But something in the air felt too familiar. Like this was only the first round. And I knew exactly whose fingerprints were all over this. Linda Maddox. The 5'2" tyrant with hair like a cotton candy helmet and a smile sharp enough to slice drywall. She ran the HOA like it was a country she founded, ruled, and intended to pass on to the nearest golden retriever that looked like her. 43 minutes after the raid, she strutted down our street like she was arriving at a movie premiere. Silk robe, slipper heels, iced coffee in hand, acting shocked at the flashing lights. "Oh my goodness!" she gasped loudly. "What happened here?" I stood. Mason flinched. The officer beside me stepped forward. "Ma'am, we're handling an active investigation." She clucked her tongue. Yes, but this is MY neighborhood. I am the president. I deserve to know." I stepped between her and Mason. "Back up." She smiled like she'd practiced that exact moment in a mirror. "Eli, don't be dramatic. If you just followed the regulations, none of this was legal," I snapped. "Save it." She placed a hand over her heart like I'd wounded her. "Are you accusing me of something?" The cop asked, "Do you know anything about an HOA enforcement operations unit?" She blinked. "A what?" He held up the fake badge in a plastic evidence bag. She examined it with exaggerated innocence. "Never seen it before in my life." Her eyes flicked to me, and the corner of her mouth twitched. She was loving this. The officer wrote something on his clipboard, and Linda slowly walked past me, lowering her voice so only I could hear. "You brought this on yourself." I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached. "Linda, 4 men broke into my house. 1 threatened my son." She shrugged. "Choices have consequences." She walked away humming. I swear I saw red. But blowing up wouldn't help. I had to stay focused for Mason. The moment the cops cleared out, I brought him inside, sat him down at the kitchen island, and made him hot chocolate. He stirred it without drinking. "Dad." "Yeah, buddy. I didn't want to shoot him." "I know." He was yelling at me. I froze. And then, something in my head just snapped on. I put a hand on his shoulder. "You did everything right. You saved both of us." He nodded but didn't believe it. Not fully. Up until tonight, Mason had been a kid. Now he was something else, something heavier. I wanted to call my sister, or a therapist, or someone who had a handbook for what to do when your kid is forced to do the unthinkable. But the universe didn't care about my emotional breakdown schedule, because at 9:12 a.m., while Mason finally slept on the couch, boots crunched on my driveway. I looked through the peephole. 2 people stood there wearing clipboards, khaki vests, and smug expressions. Great. HOA inspectors. Real ones this time. I opened the door a crack. What? The woman smiled like a customer service robot. Good morning. We're here to perform property compliance checks on behalf of HOA President Maddox. You're here now, I barked. After my door was kicked in? Yes, she said cheerfully. It appears your property may have violated multiple bylaws, including excessive noise, unauthorized police presence, and visible damage to front entry structures. My eyebrow twitched. You mean the door your president's fake SWAT raided? She ignored that. The man added, we also need to document your truck, the green F-250, parking violation. I pointed at the shattered door. You're worried about my truck? They both nodded. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me so Mason wouldn't hear. Listen, I said, slow and calm. Last night wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't an accident. Your president sent criminals into my house. Impossible, she chirped. I leaned closer. Then explain how they came straight to my address with a bogus warrant quoting an HOA violation only Linda has ever accused me of. Silence. Then the woman said, Sir, are you refusing inspection? I'm refusing stupidity. They wrote something on their clipboards and walked off. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream, but I knew this much. Linda wasn't backing down. She wanted us scared, vulnerable, off balance, which meant one thing. She thought she had protection, and I was about to find out exactly who was protecting her. But first, I needed proof. Real proof. Not speculation, not suspicion. The kind of proof that ends careers. So while Mason slept, I grabbed my keys and headed out. Not to the police station. To someone who had a lot more dirt on Linda Maddox than the cops ever would. Someone who used to be on her side. Someone who now hated her more than I did. Her ex-husband. Linda's ex-husband lived 3 streets over, in the only house on Maple Ridge that had the courage to look deadly un-HOA compliant. Peeling paint. Overgrown bushes. A broken flamingo stuck in the yard like a war casualty. It was a masterpiece of petty rebellion. His name was Darren Maddox, though after the divorce he went by Darren Cole. He dropped Linda's last name like it was radioactive. When I knocked on his door, I expected some grumpy, hungover dude who'd tell me to leave him alone. Instead, Darren answered wearing pajama pants and a bathrobe patterned with cheeseburgers. He squinted at me. Eli Carson? What did Linda do now? Try to outlaw oxygen? I said, For men broke into my house last night pretending to be HOA enforcement. His eyes widened. Ah, so she's a skeleton. Cool. Come in. His living room looked like a yard sale crashed into a conspiracy theorist's office. Pizza boxes, old HOA newsletters, a corkboard covered in strings, photos, and sticky notes that said things like HOA Coup 2023 and Linda Power Hungry. Darren dropped onto a beanbag chair that sighed under his weight. Start from the top. I told him everything, the raid, the fake uniforms, the bogus warrant, Mason firing in self-defense, Linda strolling down like she was checking mail. Darren whistled. She finally did it. She snapped. You sound like you expected this. Buddy, he laughed. I married that woman. She's been 2 stops short of a meltdown since the day they made her HOA treasurer. You ever see a raccoon discover nacho cheese? Her eyes looked like that when she realized the power of fines. But fake SWAT raids? He shrugged. Yeah, that's new even for her. I leaned forward. I need proof she organized this. Something solid. Emails. Messages. Anything. Darren scratched his beard. Funny thing. After the divorce, she forgot to revoke my cloud access to the HOA shared drive. She probably thought I was too dumb to use it. He grabbed a laptop, opened it, typed a password so fast it looked like he was hacking the Pentagon, and clicked into a folder labeled HOA Security Task Force Confidential. He winked at me. She named the damn thing herself. Inside were PDFs, photos, equipment orders, meeting notes, and something that made my jaw lock. A document titled Operation Early Dawn. Authorized Entry Plan. Darren opened it. It listed my address, my truck, the timeline, instructions for forced entry, and Linda's signature at the bottom. My blood ran cold. "This is it," I whispered. "This puts her in prison." "Yup," Darren said. "But you'll need more. Something that shows intent." She always covers her tracks with plausible deniability crap. We clicked another file. Neighborhood compliance issues, priority threats. My name was at the top, in red. Beside it, known agitator, non-compliant, has challenged HOA authority publicly. Action required. Then there were messages between Linda and a contact saved as Diop. Darren squinted. Diop? Oh hell, that's her new boyfriend. Doug something. Guy's a walking felony. I stared at the screen. Doug, the guy Mason shot. The messages were unmistakable. Linda, he won't listen. We need to show him he can't defy us. Doug, want me to send the team? Linda, yes, make it official looking. Scare him straight. Doug, on it. Early morning hit. He won't see it coming. Linda, good. My heart hammered. She ordered it. She orchestrated everything. And then we found the bomb. A voice memo titled, "For the board justification." Darren clicked play. Linda's voice filled the room. "If Eli Carson thinks he can embarrass me, he's wrong. We need compliance, and if it takes force, so be it. Call it a safety inspection. Nobody will question it. The board will thank me later." I sat back, shaking with adrenaline and fury. This wasn't negligence. This wasn't recklessness. This was premeditated. Darren leaned back in the beanbag. "So, what's your move?" "I take this to the police." He gave a sarcastic snort. "You think cops are gonna push hard on an HOA president with half the city council on her Christmas list? You need to go bigger." "Bigger than the law?" He nodded. "You want justice? You need pressure. Public pressure. Social pressure. Her cronies need to turn on her." "You're talking about what? Exposing her online?" "Exactly. HOA people fear two things: lawsuits and humiliation." I wasn't convinced. Going public feels messy. So does staying alive in a neighborhood run by a power-drunk tyrant who sent a fake SWAT team to your bedroom, he said. Fair point. Darren pulled up a final file, a spreadsheet titled Special Projects Budget. Under it was a line item, Enforcement Unit Gear, $14,762. I blinked. How'd she get that much money? He gave me a look. Where do you think all those trash bin fines were going? My stomach twisted. Mason and I weren't the only victims. This entire neighborhood had been funding her dictatorship. I copied everything to a thumb drive Darren handed me. Before I left, he said one last thing. Careful, Eli. When you corner someone like Linda, she doesn't back down. She bites. I believed him. On the drive home, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting a black SUV to appear. When I walked inside, Mason was awake, sitting on the couch, eyes puffy but alert. Dad, where'd you go? I sat next to him and told him the truth. Not all of it, just enough. We're gonna fix this, I said softly. What happened last night? We're not letting her get away with it. He nodded slowly. Good. But then he asked the question I'd been dreading. What if she tries again? I looked at my son. My kid who should have been worried about college apps, not home invasions. And I said the only thing I could. Then we'll be ready. But even as I said it, I knew something terrifying. Linda wasn't done. Not even close. Because the moment I logged into my home PC to start making a plan, a notification popped up. An HOA announcement. Sent to the whole neighborhood. Signed by Linda. It read, Emergency meeting tonight, mandatory attendance. Topic, disciplinary action against resident E. Carson. My vision blurred with rage. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was coming for me publicly, and I was walking straight into her trap. That evening, I parked Mason's car in the driveway and sat in mine, staring at the dimming streetlights, plotting my next move. Linda Maddox had officially declared war on me, and not subtly. The entire neighborhood was being dragged into her circus, and I was center stage. I glanced at Mason. He was sitting on the porch steps, hoodie pulled over his head, knees tucked into his chest. The weight of last night was still in his eyes. I wanted to tell him it would be okay, but even I didn't know if it would be. The HOA meeting notice was short, cold, and tyrannical. Mandatory attendance, disciplinary action against resident E. Carson. No room for discussion, no sense of legality, just a power play written in bold red letters. I wanted to tear it up, but part of me knew that wouldn't stop her. She thrived on spectacle. When we entered the community clubhouse, the smell of cheap coffee and old carpet hit me like a punch to the gut. I hadn't been in that place since the old board used to meet, back when HOA rules were annoyingly tedious but not life-threatening. Now it was different. The air was charged with tension, whispers of who might get fined next, who might be next in line for compliance enforcement. Linda stood at the front, arms crossed, looking like she had the world in her pocket. Her boyfriend Doug hovered nearby, smirking. Around them were the usual HOA sycophants. Neighbors who'd once complained about paint colors, but now wore expressions like they'd been recruited into some criminal gang. She slammed her gavel, an embarrassing knockoff from Amazon, onto the podium. Order. This meeting is called to discuss the blatant disregard for community rules by E. Carson. A smattering of polite claps, some nervous nods, but most of the room avoided eye contact. I stood, Mason just behind me. Linda, this is harassment. 4 men broke into my home at 3 a.m. last week. They claimed to be your HOA enforcement team. One of them was shot by my son in self-defense. The room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. Some neighbors even gasped audibly. Linda blinked, pretending shock. I have no idea what you're talking about. That's preposterous. Absolute nonsense. I held up the thumb drive. I have everything. Emails, orders, instructions. Proof you sent those men. You planned this. Premeditated home invasion. All in the name of HOA compliance. Doug's smirk faltered. A few board members whispered to each other. Linda's lips tightened, but her eyes burned with fury. Where did you get that? She hissed. From someone who used to trust you, I said, letting Darren's name hang in the air like a warning. And from my own evidence collected after your last raid. A murmur ran through the room. Finally, one of the board members, a woman named Karen, the only one who had shown any spine in years, stood up. Linda, this is criminal. You can't just order people into someone's house. This isn't enforcement. This is assault. Linda's face turned red. I was ensuring compliance. That's my job. You think the neighborhood rules don't matter? He's a danger to our standards. Danger, I said, voice calm but deadly. The only danger here is your obsession with power. You can't hide behind bylaws to terrorize families. Mason's hand brushed mine. He looked up at me, exhausted, but still alert. I squeezed it. He'd witnessed evil masquerade as authority. He understood what real courage looked like. The rest of the meeting devolved into chaos. Doug tried to intervene, claiming he didn't know the men would break in, but the emails on my thumb drive clearly proved otherwise. Board members started leaving one by one, some shaking their heads, others whispering that they'd had enough of Linda's madness. By the end of the night, Linda Maddox stood alone at the podium, furious, humiliated, and shrinking under the weight of her own exposed corruption. The evidence was irrefutable. The fake Swat team, the forged warrants, the premeditated orders, all out in the open on display, undeniable. Outside, Mason and I walked to the car. The cool night air hit our faces. Mason finally exhaled. We actually did it, didn't we? I nodded. Yeah, buddy. We survived. And we exposed her for what she really is. But even as we drove home, I knew this wasn't over. Linda Maddox had a way of bouncing back, of rallying support among the fearful and the greedy. The legal system would deal with her eventually, but HOA politics? That was a different beast. At home, Mason flopped onto the couch, hoodie over his face. I went to the kitchen and poured us each a cup of hot chocolate. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded, but I could see the tension lingering in his shoulders. I hate that she's like that. I hate that people can be like that." "Me too," I said. "But you know what? We stood up, and we'll keep standing up. That's how people like her get stopped. Not by hiding, not by being scared, but by facing the truth and never backing down." He smiled faintly, the first real smile since the raid. "Yeah, we're like superheroes, right?" I chuckled. "More like survivors, Mason. Survivors with a plan." And that was exactly what we were. Survivors. Because Linda Maddox had underestimated two things that night. One, a father who would never let his son be a victim. Two, a son who knew exactly how far he could go to protect the ones he loved. And from that night on, Maple Ridge Estates would never look at its HOA the same way again. The next morning, Maple Ridge felt quieter. Too quiet, almost like the calm before a storm. People were whispering in driveways, casting wary glances at my house and Mason's. Some nodded in solidarity. Others glanced away, afraid to get involved. The news spread fast, not the mainstream kind yet, just the kind of viral neighborhood gossip that spreads faster than wildfire. By the time the police had wrapped up their investigation, Linda Maddox was facing multiple charges. Conspiracy to commit home invasion, impersonating law enforcement, reckless endangerment, and fraud. Doug was already in custody, nursing a bullet wound in his leg from the night Mason defended our home. But even with the law on our side, the fight wasn't over. HOA politics are like quicksand. You pull one piece, and 10 more sink you deeper. Linda still had supporters, board members who feared her wrath, neighbors too scared to speak up. And I wasn't just going to let her manipulate the neighborhood with her fake titles and cheap tactical gear ever again. I needed a strategy, not just legal but public. Pressure, exposure, and Darren's intel was key. The first thing we did was release the evidence to the local news. Carefully, strategically, just enough to make headlines but not enough to compromise the police investigation. The story caught fire. Local HOA president allegedly organizes fake SWAT raid on resident, ran across online portals, community Facebook pages, and Reddit threads. The reaction was instantaneous. Some neighbors came forward, sharing stories of fines for trivial reasons, harassment, intimidation, the tiny abuses Linda had orchestrated for years. The more we gathered, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about me. This was a systematic abuse of power. A neighborhood dictatorship dressed up as community management. Mason, surprisingly, took it in stride. I expected him to shrink back, but he watched the story go viral with a quiet satisfaction. "People need to see this," he said. "She can't hide anymore." And he was right. By midweek, the police had enough evidence to start formally building their case. The HOA board was scrambling. Some tried to defend Linda, claiming she had the neighborhood's best interests at heart. But the public humiliation was too strong. Emails, texts, photos, and witness testimonies were stacked like bricks, each one a nail in her little empire. Mason and I started to notice something else. Her supporters were turning on each other. Karen, the brave board member who first called her out, became a kind of quiet hero. People realized they didn't have to follow her blindly. Fear had been her strongest weapon, and fear was evaporating. Meanwhile, I got a call from Darren. "Eli, you won't believe it. She's trying to regroup. She called a meeting with a new crew, promising revenge." I groaned. "She never quits, does she?" "Nope," Darren laughed. "But here's the thing, she's sloppy. She doesn't think people like you and Mason will actually fight back. That's her biggest mistake." So we started preparing. Cameras, alarms, legal counsel. We even installed a few drones to monitor the perimeter. Mason was like a general, running simulations, testing the drones, checking every blind spot. I'd never seen him this focused. He wasn't just defending a house anymore. He was defending a principle. No one terrorizes his home, no one terrorizes his family, no one abuses power and gets away with it. A week later, we got our first direct warning. A note slid under the front door. "You haven't seen the last of us." LM. I held it up to Mason. "Looks like she's trying to scare us." He smirked, that same calm, lethal glint in his eyes. "She's going to have to try harder than this." That night, we reviewed the evidence again. Emails, spreadsheets, memos, screenshots. Every piece of proof stacked neatly in a folder labeled Linda Maddox. Case closed. I realized something. This wasn't just about surviving the raid anymore. It wasn't even about getting her arrested. It was about sending a message that no one, not even a tyrant with a fake SWAT team, could intimidate a family who stood up for themselves. The real twist came a few days later. As the news continued to cover the story, more people started speaking out. Former board members, neighbors who had quietly suffered under her reign, even a few of her initial enforcers who hadn't been caught, they started cooperating. Linda Maddox had bitten off more than she could chew. Doug, meanwhile, was facing the legal consequences of his direct involvement. Mason's actions were reviewed by the Juvenile Division and, as expected, cleared completely. The police and DA declared it textbook self-defense. Mason had acted rationally, precisely, and with the right judgment. That night, I watched him sleep. For the first time since the raid, I allowed myself a breath I hadn't taken in a week. He wasn't just my son anymore. He was a symbol of resilience, of courage, of standing up when the odds seemed insurmountable. I realized that the moral of this nightmare wasn't just about resisting abuse. It was about teaching your kids to stand for what's right, about showing them how to defend themselves, physically, mentally, emotionally. It was about taking the power out of the hands of those who abuse it and putting it back where it belongs, with justice, with truth, and with the community. Linda Maddox's empire was crumbling. But more importantly, the neighborhood had woken up. People were talking. People were watching. People were refusing to live under fear. And Mason and I, we were ready for whatever came next. Because when someone crosses the line, really crosses it, they don't just face the law. They face the people they've hurt. And sometimes, one small family with courage, preparation, and a son who knows how to defend himself can change everything. The morning after the neighborhood started talking, Maple Ridge felt like it was breathing again. The air wasn't just quiet. It was alive, charged with a mixture of relief, disbelief, and the satisfaction of justice finally in motion. People I had never spoken to before nodded at me as I walked Mason to the driveway. Some whispered thanks. Others gave me cautious smiles. For the first time in years, it felt like the neighborhood belonged to the residents, not a tyrant in a silk robe. Linda Maddox? She was spiraling. Her name was all over local news, Facebook groups, Reddit threads, even the HOA email chain. The irony wasn't lost on me. Mandatory meetings were now replaced with subpoenas, formal complaints, and whispers of a complete board overhaul. She had tried to build fear into the neighborhood, but what she didn't calculate was that fear is fragile when exposed to truth. Mason and I sat on the porch, hot chocolate in hand, the morning sun warming our faces. He kicked at the gravel, quiet for a moment, then said, "Dad, do you think she'll ever try something like that again?" I looked at him, trying to gauge the right words. He was my son, no longer a child completely sheltered from the world, but not hardened either. He needed reassurance, and he needed to understand the lesson of what we just survived. "She might," I admitted, "but we've done more than defend ourselves. We've made sure everyone knows what she's capable of, and that means she doesn't get to control us anymore." Mason nodded slowly. "So, the scary part's over?" "For now," I said. "But the real victory isn't about fear ending tonight. It's about not letting anyone take it from you. Ever. That's something no one can touch. Not her, not Doug, not some fake SWAT team." By midday, the police had filed charges, and news outlets were calling me for interviews. I explained, calmly, what had happened, emphasizing the importance of truth, the dangers of unchecked authority, and the courage of ordinary people standing up to abuse. Mason watched from the sidelines, a quiet pride in his eyes. He didn't speak to reporters, he didn't need to. His actions had already told the world everything. What struck me most, though, was the response from the neighborhood. Letters of support poured in, neighbors volunteering to serve on the board, offering to testify, sharing stories of how Linda's petty reign had affected them. The community was waking up, stronger than ever. People realized that one person's abuse of power can be fought, and that standing together matters. Weeks later, the trial began. Linda tried to claim ignorance, to blame Doug, to play the victim. But the evidence was overwhelming. Emails, the operation plan, the fake badges, witness testimony, and most damning of all, her own voice memo describing the raid as a necessary action to enforce compliance. The jury didn't blink. She was convicted on multiple counts: conspiracy, impersonation, and reckless endangerment, and sentenced to a term that would make anyone else think twice before abusing their authority. Doug faced similar consequences, and the rest of the makeshift HOA enforcement unit either pleaded guilty or received probation. The law had finally caught up with their fantasy of control, and Maple Ridge was left to rebuild. Mason and I went home that night, tired but lighter. He flopped on the couch and smiled for the first time in weeks. "We did it, didn't we, Dad?" I nodded, ruffling his hair. "We did. You were brave, Mason. Braver than most adults would have been." He laughed softly. "I was just protecting you." "You did more than that," I said. "You protected our home, our family, and our right to live without fear. That's bigger than anything." Over the following months, the HOA board was restructured. New leadership, transparent policies, and proper checks and balances were implemented. No more self-appointed tyrants, no more fake raids. The community learned that power without accountability is dangerous, and that standing up, even in the face of intimidation, can change everything. Mason returned to normal teenage life with a new perspective. He built PCs again, went out with friends, and started working on community projects. But the lessons stayed with him. He understood courage, responsibility, and the value of truth in a way few 18-year-olds ever do. As for me, I realized something profound. The real moral wasn't about guns or raids. It wasn't about laws or fines. It was about courage, resilience, and the willingness to confront injustice, no matter how absurd or terrifying it seems. Because sometimes, it takes one small act, one refusal to be intimidated, to spark a chain reaction that exposes corruption, protects the innocent, and restores balance. And sometimes, it takes a father and his son, standing side by side, to remind the world that no one, not even a fake HOA cop, can steal your home, your peace, or your dignity without a fight. We rebuilt our front door. We installed security cameras. Mason designed a simple alert system for the house. But more importantly, we rebuilt trust in ourselves, in each other, and in our community. Looking back, I know that night could have gone differently. I know Mason could have been hurt, but I also know that standing up, acting when others would freeze, and refusing to let fear control your life, that's what changed everything. Linda Maddox is gone from our lives, but the lessons remain. Vigilance, courage, and the power of a community that refuses to bow to tyranny. Mason and I, we're just a small family in a small town, but we learned something big. Standing up matters. Doing nothing is never an option.